Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching 7th part of What If Naruto and Sasuke Travel Back in Time. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Despite the fact that the sun was shining and the birds were singing, the Hidden Leaf Village was a hive of activity. Residents, tourists, and visitors were all buzzing with excitement as their patience was finally paying off. The Chunin exam finals would begin in less than an hour. Many people had been looking forward to this day in order to see if their predictions for the matches were correct. Many of them were betting on the outcomes, while others were simply looking for good seats. Despite the positive energy of the civilians, the shinobi were tense. Hayate, a Konoha Jonin, was murdered by an unknown assailant sometime during the month. He was able to leave a message warning of an impending invasion with the last of his strength. The higher-ranking shinobi weren't the only ones tense with fear. Rookies who had missed the finals and were in the audience were also on high alert. They'd known the invasion was coming for a long time and had been preparing for it. There is, however, nothing anyone can do to truly prepare for a war if they have never been in one. Even those who could not adequately prepare. They did know, however, that if Naruto and Sasuke did not appear soon, they would be disqualified. "Where are they already?" Haku yelled, chakra leaking out and chilling the air around her. As the people around them watched the girl wearily, Choji chuckled nervously. "I'm sure they'll be here soon, Haku, but I think your chakra is making the atmosphere a little too cold for the Land of Fire natives." Haku blinked at the boy, then laughed nervously. "Sorry. Temper Haku, if neither of those boys shows up soon, I'm going to hunt them down myself," Zabuza said from next to her. Haku simply nodded and turned his gaze to the arena floor, where a similar discussion was taking place. Shikamaru sighed. "Ino, stop twitching. I'm sure Sasuke and Naruto will be here soon." Ino twitched slightly more and growled. Sighing, he turned to his side just in time to see Hinata and Neji exchange respectful nods. Without saying anything, they appeared to have promised an honest fight as shinobi rather than Hyuga clan members. Shikamaru thought, troublesome. Fu perked up. "Sasuke and Naruto are coming, but I have to question their mental maturity if they're doing what I think they're doing," she told the others, raising their eyebrows at the emphasis on mental. It was strange for the foreigners because they should be the same age physically and mentally, right? They simply sighed for the other genin. It meant that the 31-year-old Hokage had talked Sasuke into doing something reckless and childish. "Hiruzen, doesn't it feel strange for us to be sitting here like this?" asked the elder Kage as he took his seat. "Odd, it does. I never thought I'd see Kumo and Konoha side by side without them starting war in my lifetime." I laughed at the retort, knowing there was some veiled aggression in it. "That's true, but is it always this windy here this time of year?" He wondered as the Kage took his seat quietly. "Now that you mention it, no," Hiruzen said as the wind picked up. A twisting column of air descended from the sky and landed in the center of the arena before anyone could say anything. It spun out of existence as quickly as it appeared, revealing a medium-sized group in the center. "How many times have I told you not to do that, Dobi?" yelled Sasuke as he regained his bearings. "Did you want to be late?" Naruto chuckled as he watched one of the Sannin struggle to keep his breakfast down and his Jonin struggle in vain to regain his footing. "If we had picked up speed, we wouldn't have been," Sasuke retorted angrily. Naruto had been using that technique since he invented it, and he had never once given any warning. The Toad Sage appeared in front of Naruto, pointing at his face. "God damn it, Gaki. If you do that again, I'll make sure your line ends with you. I've told you a million times not to do that," he yelled, turning away as he turned green again. Naruto's reaction was to blow a raspberry, which caused the red-haired kunoichi with them to laugh. Kakashi simply groaned at their childishness and grabbed Jiraiya and Karen's shoulders without warning, using the shunshin to transport them to the stands, causing the green color on the Toad Sage to darken. Jiraiya, please tell me you haven't discovered a way to naturally turn into a toad, because you're starting to look like one, Kakashi joked before darting out of sight. Kakashi, my eternal rival. You were almost unyouthfully late. Gaia yelled, motioning to Naruto, who was glaring and twitching. Taking a deep breath, Guy shuddered as it appeared that the Nine Tails was glaring just as hotly behind Naruto. My bad, but seriously, you were almost late and you missed the briefing, Guy said cryptically, referring to the invasion announcement. Sorry. We would have been here yesterday, but we ran into some bandits who were harassing a town, and you know Naruto. He had to step in to save them, and because it was late when we dealt with the problem, they insisted that we stay the night. We somehow managed to sleep through all of our alarms, and only woke up about an hour ago. We were going to run here when Naruto pointed out that if we did that, we wouldn't make it in time. What was that? Haku inquired, intrigued. I'm not sure. He never told us the theory behind it, Kakashi admitted. I know that's the weakest form of it. I'm not even sure what that technique is meant for. Guy nodded and turned to look at Karen, who appeared to be chatting with the Akamichi heir about the benefits of certain low-calorie foods to the clan, despite the high-calorie requirements for their jutsu. She appears to be content. She's Naruto's cousin. Apparently she has a unique manifestation of one of the clan's abilities that Kusagakure was abusing. When her team died in the forest, Naruto decided to invoke part of the Uzu Konoha Treaty regarding his clan members' safety and basically told the Kusakage to go fuck himself in regards to her return. Obviously he wasn't happy, and when he actually tried to send some. That was a bad idea, Kakashi agreed, looking around at the rest of the Konoha Jonin for the genin. Are they prepared for what is to come? As ready as they can be. In all honesty, I believe the only ones truly ready are Sasuke and Naruto, and only because of how much they have already lived through, Guy said quietly, prompting Kakashi to nod once more. May I have your attention, please? Said a voice from the arena, drawing everyone's attention. The final round of the Chunin selection exams will now begin. I am the proctor for this phase Shiranui Genma. The rules for this round are the same as the preliminary round. The fight ends once the opponent has forfeited, been incapacitated in any way, lost consciousness, or died. Any fighting after the match is called will result in an immediate disqualification. Your move, Orochimaru, they both thought at the same time. As Sasuke moved to stand across from Lee, he noticed something was off. But for some reason, he couldn't pinpoint what was different. Lee was looking at his opponent intently and analyzing him. He knew he had no chance against Sasuke. Only Naruto could do it. However, he had to demonstrate that anyone, if they put their heart and soul into their training, could become an amazing shinobi. Being at a disadvantage does not automatically imply that you are a bad shinobi. Begin, Genma said as soon as he saw that both of them were ready to go. He didn't feel like he was proctoring a Chunin exam for some reason. For some reason, the two genin reminded me of Jonin. As soon as they were given the go-ahead, the two shinobi dashed at each other, determined to end the match quickly. In Sasuke's case, he knew that a prolonged battle would wear him out too quickly and that there was little to no chance of escaping a battle with Lee unscathed. Lee was always making sure that he was just out of eye contact range. Sasuke's eyes widened as he moved quickly to block an attack he hadn't seen coming. Instead of stopping it as he thought, he flew across the ring and collided with the back wall. There was complete silence in the arena as everyone tried to process what had just happened. Naruto was one of many who were perplexed. Sasuke grimaced as he pushed himself away from the wall and narrowed his eyes at Lee, who remained motionless, never taking his gaze away from him. When he raised his arms to inspect them, he groaned as he noticed a bruise forming. A true dark bruise. When he returned his gaze to the taijutsu practitioner, his eyes narrowed even more before opening in realization. Across the street, Lee's face broke into a grin as the realization dawned on him. "You figured it out already," he praised, making Sasuke nod. "I just don't know how," Sasuke replied. "I'll tell you if you win," Lee promised before disappearing from view once more. This time, instead of blocking, Sasuke dodged out of the way and kicked out as soon as Lee was forced to slow down. He pushed the boy back a few feet, his feet connecting with Lee's midsection, and growled, pumping chakra into his legs. He kicked him again when he reappeared in front of the startled boy. This time, he was launched across the arena, which was the desired effect. Exactly as I predicted. But how so? His chakra coils weren't developed enough for that, Sasuke reasoned as he drew some shuriken and hurled them at the older boy. Instead of dodging, Lee simply swatted the stars from the air before charging once more, this time drawing a collapsible bow staff from his hip pouch. Unsealing his sword, Sasuke met Lee's attack, and the sound of metal hitting metal could be heard as their weapons collided. A metal staff? Surely you didn't forget my element, Lee? Chided Sasuke as he channeled his Raiden chakra down the blade and into the staff in the hopes of stunning the green-clad boy. Of course not, Lee replied, as the lightning never reached him. It has a slew of seals to keep that from happening, and TenTen's father was more than happy to make it for me. With that exchange, the battle continued. However, Sasuke knew it couldn't go on. Let's hope this doesn't come back to bite me later, he thought as he closed his eyes. Lee swung the staff and froze in surprise as it collided with a massive purple construct instead of Sasuke. He jumped backwards, stunned by the creation. Susanoo. One of the Uchiha clan's strongest defensive jutsu, Sasuke explained to the boy. Despite being made of chakra and only a skeleton, the being appeared human in form, but it was massive. I see, so this is the ultimate defense that the Uchiha clan is said to have. Raised an eyebrow. Hiruzen was staring quietly at the construct, his mind racing at a breakneck pace. How did Sasuke obtain the next level of the Sharingan? Is Itachi already gone? What had happened during the training trip? I'm very impressed, Lee. To go from having no chakra at all to being able to convert it to elemental chakra and learn how to supplement your taijutsu with it, making it even more lethal in just a month is something you should be proud of, Sasuke said as Lee continued to study the ethereal creature. I needed something to help me compete with ninjutsu users. That's when I realized that while I couldn't use ninjutsu or genjutsu, I could still do the water walking and tree climbing exercises. That meant I wasn't incapable of using chakra, I just didn't produce chakra at the same rate as everyone else because my coils are too small for that. The important part was that I could use chakra. I'm really impressed. You're making far more progress than before, Sasuke said, making sure Lee understood he had already surpassed his other self from Sasuke's future. Nodding, he relaxed his stance slightly and restored his staff. I was fortunate enough that my chakra nature was Doden. I have a long way to go before I can fight you with it because all the nature transformation has to be done internally for me, but I had to see if it would help me fight against you. The fact is that it can, but I am still not at your level. Plus I have a feeling that the technique you just used is only in its weakest form and I couldn't even scratch it. I'm excited, Lee, Sasuke said, releasing the chakra around him as Genma declared him the winner. As the outcome was announced, applause erupted throughout the stadium. Despite the fact that many in attendance did not see the majority of the match due to the speed, they knew that something special had occurred in the arena between the two who appeared to be friends. Next match, Nara Shikamaru vs. Aburame Shino, Genma announced as the two walked down the stairs quietly. Naruto returned to his side, nodding to Sasuke and settling in to watch a battle of strategy versus strength and technique. As the two took their positions, they carefully assessed their opponent. Both knew that neither of them was the type to fight without a plan, but if they tried to outwit one another, Orochimaru might start the invasion out of boredom. After a split second, they both twitched, realizing they had reached the same conclusion. Troublesome. I agree, Shino said as the match began. Shikamaru finished a strand of seals as soon as Genma finished speaking, surprising the audience as he jumped away from Shino. He quickly called out, Hajutsu, Kage no Atsumari. Jumping away from his position, Shino watched as the entire side of the ring Shikamaru was on filled with thick almost solid shadows, obscuring his vision. Narrowing his eyes, he sent a small group of Kakaichu into the inky darkness, only to see the shadows twist and transform into Senbon, spearing the insects before they could get too close. Sorry Shino, but your Kakaichu will be unable to approach me, and I have already removed the female you tagged me with, Shikamaru said, his voice coming from almost everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I see. You've created something similar to the Naidem Hokage's Kokangyo no Jutsu, but it works in reverse and is more of a ninjutsu than a genjutsu. You conceal yourself, effectively blinding yourself, in a corporeal mass of shadow that acts as offense, defense, and a sensory field, Shino deduced, furrowing his brow. That's not all it does, Shino. You are correct that it materializes the shadows, much like the clan's Kageyose no Jutsu. However, it is much more than that. The Aburame are capable of controlling the battlefield with their Kakaichu by spreading them out and communicating with them. The Nara can't do that, and most of our jutsu are only at their best when combined with the Akamichi and Yamanaka clan. I will admit that the Naidaim's counter to dojutsu users was inventive and somewhat of a base for this technique, but if yin-based jutsu can rob people of their sight, then what else can it do? After thinking about it, I realized that it could do anything as yin release is governed by the imagination. Granted, the Nara clan has never been very creative in that regard, but training with Naruto taught me that. It's clever, but you aren't the only one who has pondered what he meant by that. I have my own interpretation that has shown their results, Shino replied as another swarm of insects flew from his coat. When they made contact with the shadow insects, however, instead of being skewered, they exploded and dispersed the shadows that comprised the insects. Shikamaru's eyes widened at the strange kamikaze strategy of a clan that valued their hives. Konshu o Bakuhatsu sa Seru. The result of attempting to combine my affinities into my Kakaichu in order to make them resistant to fire jutsu. It worked as they are fireproof, but they have drastically shorter lives compared to the rest of the Kakaichu breeds that we have. As a result, with my father's help, we managed to make them into kamikaze attacks. They may have shorter lives, but they are much easier to. My shadows versus your hybrids, huh? Let's see who can outlast each other then, Shikamaru said, sending another swarm of insects, this time mixed in with shadow kunai. Shino retaliated by throwing kunai armed with flash tags to neutralize those while his insects dealt with the imposters. The following minutes were filled with loud explosions and flashes of light as they attempted to outmaneuver each other. As the explosions seemed to die down and the crowd's eyesight returned, they were treated to another unexpected sight. A taijutsu match between two genin from clans that specialized in mid-range fighting and tactics. They both quickly disengaged and began to make the same seal. Kaiten. Gokakyu no Jutsu. They both exclaimed, releasing fireballs of similar size. They collided in the middle and began to fight for dominance. Shikamaru gritted his teeth and carefully began to craft another set of seals while still holding the fireball. However, before he could finish them, the ground beneath him exploded, releasing hundreds of insects. After canceling the technique, Shikamaru looked around the arena and nodded to Genma. Ibrahim Shino is the winner. Does that mean you just combined your Doten with the Kakaichu? Pretty much. They are far more durable, but they are more difficult to breed and grow slower, Shino replied, holding out his hand to Shikamaru, who gladly accepted. What the hell was that, Shikamaru? Exclaimed Ino from the stands, making him sweat. First she tells me to train harder and stop being so lazy and unmotivated, and then she yells anyway. Shikamaru grumbled, making the audience laugh. What is it about blondes that makes them so difficult to annoy you, Shikamaru? Naruto replied. Shikamaru's head dropped and he let out a whine in response to his question. The laughter grew around him. Those are some genin you seem to have, Hiruzen. Developing new jutsu and coming up with innovative ideas so soon out of the academy and at their age is something not many can boast about, observed, his gaze fixed on Hiruzen. Yes, they appear to have been motivated recently by two of their classmates, one of whom you have already seen, Sasuke. I noticed that he appeared to be far more than a typical genin. Having the same eyes as his older brother at his age is truly a feat to be proud of. I agree. Not even Itachi had access to the Susanoo at such a young age, though I am concerned that they are pushing themselves too far. Let them be. They're growing stronger at a rate not seen since the clan wars, and it's strengthening the village even more. What's to worry about? Rasa said for the first time. That is precisely why. You have heard tales of the kind of shinobi that came from that era. Two of our cage were from that era, as was one of our biggest traders. The world no longer requires strength like that, Hiruzen countered. I have to agree. The world doesn't need that kind of strength anymore, though there's nothing wrong with growing stronger on your own. Perhaps they've already decided on their life goals and, as a result, know what they need to be able to do to achieve them, so they should be left alone. I replied. We shall see. There are still 4 matches to go, and when they are done, perhaps we will have a better idea of what they are capable of, and perhaps an idea of their goals, Hiruzen replied, his gaze fixed on Naruto. What are you hiding, and how much of it is known to the other genin? Have you all turned against Konoha? Will you do it? Don't make me regret leaving you alone, Naruto. Blinking Hiruzen's gaze was met by a pair of icy blue eyes that screamed an answer to his unspoken questions. Eyes befitting an old war veteran rather than a newly minted genin. You'll never meet old man. Even if you did, you won't be able to stop it. The third Chunin exam finals match is between Yamanaka Ino and Uzumaki Fu. Genma announced and watched as the two confidently walked down to the center of the arena. Ino took a deep breath and smiled, nodding to the Jinchuriki across from her. Begin. Ino wasted no time in attempting to distance herself from the powerhouse. She knew she couldn't compete with Fu in taijutsu. Without extensive training, there was no way. That was something she simply did not have time for. She took a breath and exhaled while weaving her hands into seals. Sajin Arashi, Doten. A massive cloud of dust rose, obscuring Fu's vision and concealing Ino. Nodding, Ino palmed several senbon and took a deep breath. She didn't have the chakra reserves to perform jutsu recklessly, and she had created this one to keep her hidden. The dust was much heavier and more difficult to blow away than it would have been otherwise, so Fu would have to spend a few extra seconds getting rid of it. She threw out her hand and let several senbon fly in a slight arc. Fu was irritated by the dust. Though it was to be expected, given that she was primarily a taijutsu practitioner. She focused the chakra by clapping her hands and pointing them towards the cloud. Daitapa Futon. Fu watched as the jutsu barely moved the dust. Gritting her teeth, she poured more chakra into the technique, finally blowing it away after several seconds. Her attention had been drawn to the dust, and she had almost missed the senbon flying towards her from the side. She grinned at Ino as she jumped out of the way. You'll have to put in more effort than that. I will. As Fu vanished and reappeared near her, Ino responded by pulling something from her pouch. Ino's hand lashed out, and a long object flew from the pouch towards Fu, making her jump back. Fu looked back at Ino, surprised, and felt a small jolt of shock when he saw the long dark forest green whip in Ino's outstretched hand. Even Inoichi blinked in surprise. He had no idea she possessed that. A whip? Yup. Perfect for a mid-range fighter like me. I'm not cut out for taijutsu, and it'll be a long time before I can handle a lengthy ninjutsu battle. However, by using the whip to keep my enemies at bay, I can force them to fight on my terms. My ninjutsu takes care of the long-distance enemies. Fu smiled as he heard the explanation. In my opinion, a whip is ideal for you. Ino smirked and flicked her wrist, the whip speeding back towards Fu's face. Fu was forced to look for gaps in her friend's form while dodging the weapon, which seemed to get faster the more it was used. Jumping into the air, Fu was forced to spread her wings in order to gain some distance and breathing space from the girl. In just a month, Ino had become far more lethal and dangerous. Fu couldn't help but smile. Because of the poor matchup, she was afraid Ino would forfeit the match without even trying. Well, that is a risky technique. Her form is nearly perfect, but she must slow the whip to change its direction. It's not much, but it's there, and it won't be for long. She has not yet mastered this. That's good for me, but I have a feeling she knows the whip won't keep me at bay for long. What is the snag? Why not just grab the whip and yank her closer to me? As Ino twitched below, Fu thought to herself. Of course she'd fly into the air for more breathing space. She smiled as she calmed herself. She wasn't close to mastering it or the chakra requirements to use the original technique, but she had managed a weaker version that was ideal for this fight. She winked at Naruto and her father as she looked towards the stands. Inoichi's eyes widened as Naruto beamed in approval. How could she have figured it out? He exclaimed, drawing the attention of his friends nearby. Did you figure out what? Shikaku inquired. However, before Inoichi could respond, a yell from the arena caught his attention. Kayanopi no Tate! Exclaimed Mokuton. All of the onlookers were stunned as the genin's cry was followed by the rapid growth of trees bursting from the ground, protecting her not only from aerial assaults but also making any kind of flight dangerous from within. Mokuton. Shikaku exhaled in awe. Does Ino have the Mokuton? Asuma struggled mightily not to swallow his cigarette. Both yes and no. Inoichi responded. Naruto had a theory that the Shoden's ability with the Mokuton was not due to the element being a bloodline, but rather because he was unnaturally skilled in yang manipulation and merely happened upon the Mokuton by accident. That, Naruto reasoned, was why no other senju ever manifested the ability. Asuma and Shikaku stared silently down at the ground below. Oh, please. Do you now have the Mokuton? Ino laughed as Fu yelled in frustration. Fu, be cautious. This is merely a scaled-down version of the Shodai's Jukai Koten, but it serves its purpose. I'm not kidding. In annoyance, she flew to the ground. She hadn't intended to use Chomei's power before, and she certainly couldn't now. She needed to get Ino out of that little forest she had created. Oh, the Mokuton. Hiruzen, you have such a gifted genin. Rasa exclaimed. I'll take it as you weren't aware of this. Said, looking to the side to see Hiruzen's surprised expression. No, I did not. This class never ceases to amaze me, and I'm not sure how many more surprises I can take. As they returned their attention to the match, the cage could only wonder how this was possible. That's fine. It appears that I don't have a choice. Fu said this while cracking her knuckles. She jumped into the air and began to channel the chakra into her fists before returning to the ground. Many people assumed Tsunade had returned due to the explosion of ground and wood. Those who had witnessed her fight, however, knew that Fu's version was rough and far from refined. Ino cursed as Fu appeared within an arm's length of her as she lost her footing while avoiding the debris. Fu's hand brushed against her side as she jumped away and lashed out with her whip at the kunoichi. Both girls looked at each other and laughed as they jumped apart. "I give up," Ino declared unexpectedly. "Are you certain?" Genma inquired. "Yes. When Fu brushed against my side, she managed to seal my chakra. I can't fight her without it, so I'm stuck." He smiled as he nodded to Genma. "Uzumaki Fu is the winner." Ino smiled and handed Fu a small vial, pointing to her cheek as Fu looked puzzled. "My whip is poisoned, and I grazed you in our last encounter. This is the cure." Fu blinked and reached up, brushing her cheek and groaning as the red smeared it. "Thank you, Ino. Allow me to undo the suppression seal." Genma couldn't help but shake his head as they walked off the field. So far, all of the matches had demonstrated that all of the genin had the potential for Chunin and had fought honestly despite the fact that they were friends. Furthermore, they had worked hard to have an ace for the exams that their friends were unaware of. The next game. Genma called out, his eyes widening slightly. This was going to be fascinating. Hyuga Hinata versus Hyuga Neji. The cousins exchanged smiles as they crossed the room. "Thank you, Hinata-sama. Despite popular belief, I can see that you have only the best intentions for the clan. I want to thank you for assisting me in realizing this and for continuing to try to return to being family despite all of my cruel words. No thanks, Neji ni, for overcoming the hatred that had grown in the aftermath of your father's death. If I could have stopped it, I would have. We can only move forward now to ensure that he did not die in vain. In your father's memory, I will bring the clan together as it should have been from the beginning," she declared, causing many Hyuga to frown. "I know." He said this while slipping into his Juken stance and watching Hinata slip into her modified version. "Come, Neji ni, let us demonstrate to the clan how much stronger we can be when we break the chains that bind us to fate," she declared as Genma signaled the start of the match. Hinata and Neji found themselves evenly matched as they raced towards each other. His more offensive and traditional Juken is rigid and predictable. Her modified version, on the other hand, was extremely adaptable and defensive. Furthermore, Neji had never seen it before, so it was a mystery. He took a breather and assessed her calm demeanor and lack of external signs that she had done anything. "That's an interesting style. Thank you very much. During my training with Team 7, I discovered that my problem with the Juken was that I was far too flexible and the style was far too rigid. After some research, I discovered that the Juken is a nin taijutsu hybrid designed to be used with Doten users. Because the majority of our clan follows this alignment, there is rarely anyone who struggles. When people struggle, they are labeled as failures, just as I was. But we are not the failures. The elders and those who refuse to see how our traditions are weakening and destroying the clan are the failures. I now use the Yuho instead of the Juken. Take a slow step." Neji smiled and whispered. Then, unexpectedly, he bit down on his thumb, releasing a seal on the inside of his wrist. A small puff of smoke that quickly dispersed revealed that he had unsealed a sword, which he now held at the ready, much to the clan's outrage. "So you settled on Kenjutsu as your weapon of choice." Hinata laughed as she unwrapped a bow and arrow. Leaping into the sky, she drew an arrow and let it fly. She smirked as it approached Neji. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Arrow Cage." The single arrow that Neji had already moved out of the way suddenly multiplied into hundreds of arrows raining down on him. Neji did something that not even Hinata expected by drawing his sword horizontally to his chest. He began to spin. "Ten no Kaden o Suraisu," says Suraisu. He intoned, and the arrows that were about to strike him were sliced into splinters instead of bouncing off the dome. "Did you change the katan?" Hinata inquired, surprised. "You performed better in our ninjutsu training. In comparison, I was superior at taijutsu. I realized that if I was going to give you an honest match, I couldn't rely solely on the juken. However, I couldn't compete with you in ninjutsu. So I combined the two things that I was comfortable with because of my team and upbringing and enhanced them with what I could of ninjutsu." "Clever," Hinata said as she drew another arrow, but this one seemed to glow. "Taiyo no Koka," he says. As the arrow flew towards him, Neji watched in awe as it exploded. If the arrow struck the katan, the wind would only fan the flames and trap him in a fiery tornado. He gritted his teeth and wiped some blood on the blade of the sword he was holding before releasing it quickly. Water began to spill from the seal, prompting Neji to form several hand seals. "Suiten Kimusho Sakamizu," he called out as a protective dome of water formed around him. Neji gritted his teeth and began a second set of hand seals immediately after finishing the first, leaving no time in between. "Suiryuden no Jutsu, Suiten." The water serpent sped towards the Hyuga heiress, who took a deep breath and notched a third arrow. She smiled as she drew the string and pointed it at her cousin. "This is my fight, Neji." Prizumu Kaminari, as the arrow flew once more, chakra coated the weapon, this time in the form of lightning. Blasting through the dragon and tearing it to shreds, it continued forward and, true to the element's piercing nature, shot straight through the water prison, clipping Neji's shoulder before coming to rest in the wall behind him. Neji clenched his teeth as electric currents shot through his body from the glancing blow. Worse, the water he had been using to defend himself from her fire attacks was conducting and intensifying the lightning. He formed one last set of hand seals and forced out the technique, resisting the urge to scream. "Jasho Suru Chikyu no Domu, Doten." Hinata watched in awe as the ground beneath Neji shot up at the same time he released the water prison, lifting him above the water and enclosing him, protecting him from the charged water below as it splashed back down. After a few minutes, the dome cracked and fell apart from the Raiden nature chakra, but he had already achieved his objective. Neji had gotten rid of the water that had been amplifying her technique. Neji's legs buckled beneath him as he grinned at Hinata, and Genma smiled at his nod. Neji Hyuga is unable to proceed. Hinata Hyuga is the winner. As soon as the match was called, Hinata ran to Neji's side and began to heal him. "Preserve your chakra." Neji mumbled in vain, knowing she'd ignore him. "I wish we could have fought longer." She nodded in agreement as she whispered. If they had shown everything, he would have loved to see the elder's expressions. However, with the impending invasion, he couldn't risk it. "We'll have an open debate later, nay?" she murmured as he stood, albeit shakily. "The tremors should be gone in 10 to 20 minutes. Thanks." Hiruzen could only blink in surprise as they walked off the field. With Hyuga using weaponry and jutsu, a heart attack is on the way. A wide-eyed exclaimed.
"I agree."
I knew Kakashi wanted to teach a wide range of subjects, but seeing Neji depart from the Hyuga's traditionalist outlook surprised me. Hiruzen responded. Curiosity and apprehension are growing. What happened on that training trip to cause them all to change so drastically? How much of it was due to Naruto and Sasuke? What were they thinking? There were too many questions, and the number of answers he had discovered was small. The following game. Naruto Uzumaki vs. Samui. When Genma called, Naruto grinned and jumped over the railing, landing on his feet. He calmly walked to the center and waited for Samui to arrive. "Tell me, Hiruzen, is this the other genin you mentioned earlier?" Inquired, intrigued. "Yes. Teammate of Sasuke." I find it interesting that two of them are here in Konoha for a dead clan. Rasa raised her voice. Because Naruto and Fu Uzumaki parents were not present when the village was attacked, they were spared the massacre. Fu was raised near Taki until Naruto discovered her and brought her to Konoha. Hiruzen responded cryptically. Interesting. Are you two prepared? Genma smiled as both blondes nodded. Begin. Sorry, Samui, but I need to get this over with quickly. I need to conserve my chakra for the next battle. He quickly weaved hand seals. As he finished the last one, he took a small vial from his pouch and emptied it into his palm. Yumi no Kiri Sweden. He emitted a massive wave of water from his hand, which merged with the substance and flew towards Samui. The water seemed to dissolve halfway there, forming a fine mist that blanketed her entire half of the arena. Running as fast as she could out of the mist while holding her breath, she drew her sword and made a beeline for the other blonde. He didn't move as she pressed the sword against his throat. Before she could tell him to leave, her eyes became heavy and she collapsed to the ground. Surprising. When I tested that on Jiraiya, she actually lasted longer. To account for the difference in height, weight, and chakra reserves, I even weakened the potency. Naruto cocked his head and turned to face the audience. What's the story, Ero Sanin? She was there longer than you were. The arena fell silent as they processed what he had said. You already said you weakened the jutsu, brat. You idiot, jutsu is always performed with the target in mind. I told you so. The winner is Uzumaki Naruto. Genma coughed as he recovered from his shock. Don't worry, she'll be awake in about 10 minutes. He said as he walked back to the stands. What exactly was that, Naruto? Ino inquired as he approached her. It was a mix of poison and sweetened jutsu. He said it jokingly. Nay, I'll teach you later. You had better do it. I will. You have a surprising collection of genin. I've never seen Samui get caught off guard so easily. A remark while closely watching Naruto. Naruto is full of twists and turns. In all honesty, he was the Academy's lowest scoring genin this year. I didn't think anything of it at first, until I learned at his graduation that he had been hiding his true talent in order to get a team he knew he could work with. Do you mean he did it on purpose? Rasa inquired, intrigued. Yes. I'm not sure why he decided to stop at the last second, but he did. Since then, he's been nothing but a surprise. You have a very interesting genin. I'm curious how the last one will fare against Rasa's youngest. Not so good. Rasa remarked as TenTen and Gaara took their positions. Hiruzen noticed that the genin were unusually tense during the match, and that TenTen was determined but wary, as if she knew something he didn't. Sabaku no Gaara vs. Higurashi TenTen will be the final match of the first round. Are both fighters prepared? Good start. The final match of the first round will be Sabaku no Gaara vs Higurashi TenTen. Both fighters ready? Good. Begin. TenTen jumped back as soon as Genma finished his sentence, trying to put as much distance between herself and Gaara as possible. She knew it wasn't a good plan, but she needed time, and the further the sand had to travel, the more time she had. She took a deep breath and withdrew 2 scrolls, which she placed beside her, flying through a chain of hand seals. She gritted her teeth as she followed the scrolls up from the ground. She didn't have any room for error. So Shoryu! She yelled, launching a hail of sharpened kunai. She had spent the better part of a month perfecting this technique. She watched carefully as each kunai was released from the scrolls and headed straight for their target. Gaara stood motionless as the weapons approached, his sand rising to shield him. It started with a hail of kunai, then shuriken, maces, swords, tantos, and spiked clubs. Weapons of all kinds were raining down on him from above, but none of them connected with the red-haired boy. TenTen landed quickly after the scrolls had completely depleted and immediately released the shuriken she had sealed in the armbands she had worn that day. She dashed around the boy, releasing shuriken after shuriken without pausing. They all clattered to the ground after failing to pass the sand barrier. She quickly replaced herself further away as the last shuriken was thrown and watched as the log that had taken her place was mercilessly crushed. "What is TenTen up to?" Sasuke exclaimed, turning to face Naruto, who was quietly watching the battle with a critical eye. "She's going to kill herself." "Calm down, Sasuke. She knows what she's doing. Look at her eyes. She expected the outcome. I know she wouldn't have fought without a plan." He hissed, "What plan?" "She's just using a more complicated strategy than the one she used against Temari the first time they fought," Naruto explained, placing his hand on his friend's shoulder. "You have to calm down and believe in her, Teme," he said quietly, widening Sasuke's eyes. "She didn't have the training she has now, so she won't make the same mistakes. She knows what she's up against. I know you're worried, and I don't want to see her die again." "I'm sorry," Sasuke said quietly. The two time travelers were still haunted by the memory of the last time she used the technique. She had stayed behind to give her team time to flee and call for reinforcements. Sasuke and Naruto were dispatched to deal with the reported forces, and they arrived just in time to witness her attack backfire. The Kumo Nins had used the metal weaponry trail as a lightning rod. When the attack hit TenTen, they were still too far away to save her. They only needed a single second longer. Needless to say, they had always despised the attack. Cursing, TenTen was forced to abandon her next plans in favor of performing several replacements to escape the sand that was now pursuing her. Gaara had had enough of waiting. TenTen jumped immediately after replacing and landed on the stadium wall to take a breather. She couldn't continue squandering her chakra. "Just one more thing. I'm always prepared," she thought as she looked down at the Jinchuriki. She was well aware that she had no chance of winning. But that wasn't the point of this. The goal was to get Gaara out of the invasion so Naruto could focus on Orochimaru. She hoped that her fight, combined with Naruto's, would be sufficient. She nodded to herself and unsealed the item within, reaching for the second set of seals. It was roughly the same length as a wakizashi and was based on the Nuabari. Whereas the Nuabari was a chodo, hers was a distance weapon, so it was shorter and lighter. She jumped into the air again, this time directly above the Jinchuriki, and launched several swords at him. There was only one difference. Rasa remarked, "She missed." "It appears so," Hiruzen said, nodding. "No, she hit exactly what she aimed for," I countered, making the two cages return their gaze to the field. Despite the fact that it appeared to the untrained eye to be a field littered with weapons, the cages quickly realized what it meant. "Is that?" Rasa inquired, surprised. Hiruzen simply nodded and took a closer look at the girl. The genin was becoming increasingly suspicious of him. "The plans are in place," TenTen said to herself, smirking at Gaara's annoyed expression. "You failed. Do you even try anymore? Tell me, Gaara, what's so special about the Nuabari of Kiri's seven swordsmen?" she inquired. "I don't mind. The sword is more of a massive sewing needle, but it has one defining feature when it was used by the last known wielder Kushimaru. He used it to literally stitch his opponents together by pulling on a nearly invisible wire," TenTen explained. "Furthermore, all of the weapons around you were specially designed to conduct lightning chakra, thereby strengthening it. I know I can't beat you. No strategy I devised over the month would allow me to beat a Jinchuriki, perhaps temporarily incapacitate them, but I can't deal with the Biju. so I figured, why don't I take the Biju out of the equation for your next fight? She finished as lightning chakra crackled around her hand. A second wire in her other hand glowed slightly greenish. More shinobi wire sprung up around Gaara in a net-like formation as she lashed out against the kunoichi to stop her. "That's not going to save you," he exclaimed. He was not going to let her take his mother away. TenTen stood her ground and waited patiently as her teammates yelled for her to move. The sand slammed into the wire, but instead of continuing, it blew apart into harmless particles. As the last of the sand was knocked away, the net seemed to glow and crackle. "I don't have a bloodline or any family jutsu to fall back on, but I read that a shinobi in Kumo was able to combine wind and lightning chakra to make a pseudo-storm release. It took a lot of practice, but I managed to replicate the technique. Furthermore, by using my wind affinity, I can maneuver the water particles in the air to conduct my lightning affinity, making it stronger. Fuin Jutsu. Sutomu Daragon Shuru. Fuin." She yelled, the wind chakra's glow racing across a third wire to her right hand. The Raiden and Futon appeared to fight for dominance briefly before joining forces and making their way down the wire and across the seal drawn with the weapons she had positioned around Gaara. As the Rantan chakra connected with each weapon, they began to glow as well, and within seconds, a previously hidden array became completely visible due to the way the seal was lit up. Gaara tried to jump out of the array, but was stopped by a second barrier, trapping him inside. As he hit the ground, lightning raced from the seal and completely encased him. Shukaku's chakra was being drained from his system and forced back behind the seal almost instantly. It stayed there no matter how hard it thrashed against the new seal. The Suna Nin were outside the seal, witnessing something they thought would never happen. Gaara's sand practically collapsed around him as the rings faded from around his eyes. "What did you do?" "I told you. I took the Biju out of the equation. It appears as though the Biju had forcibly activated your magnet release and kept it active. You should still be able to use that." "Unfortunately, that's all I've got in me," she said, falling to the ground. Winner. Sabaku no Gaara. The next match will begin once the field has been cleared, Genma announced as Naruto and Sasuke appeared to teleport to her side. "She's fine," Sasuke said after a moment. "It's just chakra fatigue." "That was so daring, TenTen, and yet it was brilliant," Naruto said as he picked her up and carried her off the field. Naruto laid her down in the infirmary and made a few quick hand seals before placing his hand over her stomach. He shook his head after a chakra pulse. "I've replenished her depleted chakra stores there, so she should be fine when Snakeface makes his move." "TenTen!" yelled Lee as he raced into the room, concerned. "She's fine. It's just chakra exhaustion. I've already transferred some of my chakra to her to hasten her recovery. Though she may be hyper for a while. I've heard my chakra has that effect on people for some reason." Lee exhaled a sigh of relief. "It appears she has definitely been going through the Fuinjutsu books and scrolls one gave her, but I would have thought she would have been too busy," Naruto observed before turning and exiting the room. "We must return, Sasuke, or we will be disqualified." "Right," he said, nodding once more and leaving the room silently. Lee is keeping an eye on them from behind. "Guy-sensei. I believe they saw the TenTen of their time die, as if they were present but too late to save her." "I agree." Sasuke was terrified throughout the match, and it only worsened when she used the Soshoryu. Knowing what they know and also knowing that it could happen again if they aren't careful must be terrifying. "This is Lee, and I'm just grateful they decided to share some of the burden with us." Return to the ring. The arena was cleared in a matter of minutes, and Naruto and Sasuke returned just as Genma summoned everyone's attention. The first semifinal match will be Uchiha Sasuke vs. Aburame Shino. As Genma watched the two take their places, he couldn't help but notice the last Uchiha. The boy was becoming more of a mystery than he should have been, and when combined with the Sandame's order to keep a close eye on the rookies, he couldn't help but wonder what was going on. Are both fighters ready? A swarm of Kakaichu flew towards Sasuke as soon as the match began, forcing Genma to move quickly out of the way. I see. You're fire beetles. Sasuke smirked as he raced through several hand seals. Sweden. Suijinheki. A wall of water formed around Sasuke almost instantly, causing the insects to collide with the wall and explode, leaving Sasuke unharmed. Sasuke quickly moved to his next jutsu, the water falling around him. Chidori Nagashi, and lightning encircled Sasuke's body, quickly following the water that had been scattered as a result of the explosions. One of the trails that leads directly to Shino. Cursing the Aburame, he jumped out of the way, but the lightning struck him in midair. He gritted his teeth and waited for the current to pass through his muscles. As soon as that happened, he fell to the ground and discovered a sword at his throat. Aburame Shino is unable to continue. Winner. Uchiha Sasuke, Genma declared, taken aback by the speed with which Sasuke switched between nature releases and his movement speed. I'm sorry, Shino, but I need to save my chakra for later. No offense taken, but did you have to use that one? Irritated Shino. Sasuke simply laughed and assisted Shino in getting to his feet and off the field. You certainly have some unexpected genin Hiruzen. If I recall correctly, the Chidori is a weaker form of the Reikiri designed by Hitaki Kakashi, but a rookie genin appears to have modified it. They continue to surprise everyone, including myself, Hiruzen replied, hoping that his voice didn't sound as strained as he thought it did. The next match is Uzumaki Fu vs. Hyuga Hinata, Genma said, nodding as they stood across from each other, smiling. Let the best kunoichi win, they agreed before giggling. Ready? Fu flew at Hinata, unleashing a devastating right hook that the heiress quickly dodged before jumping off to the side. Eager? Perhaps. Though this is kind of annoying. You are too flexible for my taijutsu and you aren't physically strong enough to take me in taijutsu, so this will most likely be a ninjutsu battle. The problem is that our elements both defeat and fuel each other, so we would be locked in a stalemate until you ran out of chakra. Fu pouted. That just means we'll have to get creative, Hinata said, making Fu smirk. As she flew through the air, the girl made 2 hand seals and took a deep breath. Hijutsu. Rinpungakure no Jutsu. A silvery white powder was quickly exhaled, and Hinata groaned and quickly closed her eyes before the jutsu rendered her temporarily blind, and made her own hand seals. Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu, Hinata yelled as the fireball collided with the powder, causing a massive explosion to engulf the arena floor. Hinata dove into the smoke, activating her Byakugans and looking around. When she found her opponent, she drew her hand back and gathered chakra. Fu grunted as the attack collided with her midsection and thanked Chome as she felt the Biju begin to heal the area. She took another deep breath and formed several hand seals. Daitapa Futon. Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu. As the wind made contact with the smoke cloud and began blowing it away, a fireball met Fu's technique once more, and this time it sped right for her, having grown in size and power thanks to her wind jutsu. Sweden. Suijinheki. A wall of water shielded Fu as she moved quickly to another set of seals. Sweden. Suiryuden no Jutsu. Hinata quickly destroyed the dragon with another Hake Kusho before beginning her own set of seals. Raiden. Reiryuden no Jutsu, Hinata said, forming a massive lightning dragon and sending it towards Fu, using the water still in the air to boost its strength. Yoroi Futon. Wait, what is that? They asked, surprised. Rasa said bluntly, making a twitch, I believe that young Fu has made a wind version of your lightning cloak. Looking back at the fight, he saw the kunoichi charge straight at the lightning dragon and blast through it with no injuries. Hinata grunted as she performed a series of backflips to avoid Fu's relentless barrage of attacks after using the wind armor to accelerate herself. The two kunoichi then put on a stunning display of strength and acrobatics as they appeared to be at a stalemate. Hinata was trapped on the defensive, unable to compete with Fu's strength and pressed by her new speed. Meanwhile, despite the speed boost, Fu was unable to hit the annoyingly nimble Hyuga and only seemed to be delaying the inevitable. Kei's no Yeba, Fu gritted, creating a blade of pure wind and initiating a Bukajutsu clash. Hai no Yeba, Hinata said, countering Fu's wind with her fire, fulfilling Fu's earlier prediction of a stalemate in both ninjutsu and taijutsu. Both kunoichi were forced to let go of their swords as the wind caused Hinata's fire sword to spiral out of control, resulting in a massive fire in the middle of the field. Exactly as I predicted, Fu hummed. She sighed and made several hand seals before looking at Hinata. I've been working hard the last month to do my Uzumaki ancestors proud, and this is the result. Fu's body began to glow a red-gold color, dispelling her wind armor. Tengoku no Hore Fuin. Hinata gazed in awe at the vast amount of chakra she was emitting and felt her training battle with her mind over whether or not to turn off her Byakugans. She had no time to react after deciding against it because Fu was in front of her and a swift punch sent her careening into the opposite wall. In all honesty, this isn't perfect yet, Fu admitted, but I think it's the only way to actually fight you in taijutsu. Hinata stumbled to a halt, her gaze fixed on the kunoichi. I see. The seal allows you to increase your speed to the maximum possible by your body, but it appears that in its current state you trade a majority of the power you had before, which is the only reason I could still get up. Doesn't it force you to use only taijutsu? Yeah, like I said, it's not perfect, but it works for now. All of my chakra is powering the seal and can't be molded for external use, and the cloak around me needs work. Fu sighed and smiled at Hinata. Are you going to be okay? Hinata asked, her right hand pulsing with healing chakra. Yeah, but I don't think I can beat that cloak as I am now, Hinata admitted. The crowd's eyes widened as they realized the Hyuga heiress was about to forfeit. Fu's eyes widened as well. That's fine. I guess this is as good a time as any, she said, turning to face the stands where her clan was seated. This is why we need change, why the Hyuga's traditions are outdated, and this is the potential we've lost because of our current structure, she declared as she closed her eyes. Almost immediately, a violet aura encircled her body, forming her own cloak before changing to a lovely lilac color. Hinata opened her eyes after a few seconds to reveal that they were no longer the traditional white Byakugan but light blue with a white floral pattern. The cloak brightened and thickened, giving it the appearance of a protective cloak. Her chakra was audible throughout the village, and several sensors were gradually overwhelmed by the cloak's density and potency. What is that? Fu exclaimed, echoing the Hyuga clan, Kages, and several shinobi, including Kurenai, who had gathered to watch. The Tensigan. The second stage of the Byakugan. Its evolution, if you will. According to the documents I referred to in the Hyuga library that spoke of the eye and its power, the Tensigan is on par with the Rinnegan in power. However, while the Rinnegan was said to be able to resurrect the dead, the Tensigan can supposedly revive a planet that was destroyed. That's not all it can do, but more than enough information has. Yeah, Fu said in awe as Chomei said the things she had heard about the eye. Fu cocked her fist and flew towards the Hyuga at near unprecedented speeds, focused on the fight ahead. However, unlike in the past, she never made contact. Hinata simply smiled softly while holding her hand in front of her. Shinra Tensai, she said, her Jinchuriki slamming into the wall behind her as she was blasted away by an unknown force. As they witnessed the power of the previously unknown dojutsu, the entire stadium fell silent. The Hyuga clan was stunned by Hinata's appearance. They had no idea such a thing was possible, and now Hinata was proving them wrong. She did find something. She was correct, Hiyashi said quietly, attracting the attention of those around him. What exactly do you mean, Hiyashi? Hinata came to me at the beginning of the month break and asked if it was possible for the Byakugan to evolve like the Sharingan. I told her it wasn't, and she asked for permission to search the archives to see if our ancestors had that theory as well. I granted her permission on the condition that if she didn't find anything, she would stop looking into it and drop the subject. I see, he grumbled. What was that? Fu exclaimed, wincing as he climbed out of the wall. Looking up, she noticed Hinata hovering above the ground, watching her intently. Bansho Tenin. Fu felt her body lift, and before she knew it, she was flying straight at Hinata, changing stances. Fu grimaced as she felt all 64 strikes land with pinpoint precision, and she was launched away from her once more. As she fell to the ground, the chakra cloak that had surrounded her faded, and her body became heavier and more painful. Sorry Fu, but I saw the other problem with that seal. At those speeds, you might as well have opened the 8 gates. Granted, it is best suited for someone like you, but in its incomplete form it is quite the double-edged sword. Hinata explained, making the Jinchuriki nod sadly. I would have won against anyone else. Except Naruto. And maybe Sasuke, she said as Genma called the match. Fu is unable to continue. The winner is Hyuga Hinata. After deactivating her Tensigan, Hinata knelt and carefully reopened the Tenketsu she had closed before assisting Fu off the field. The applause was both thunderous and deafening. The audience had clearly enjoyed the show. Naruto shifted his gaze to Gaara and braced himself. This was not going to be simple. He was aware of it. What he had planned could backfire on him, but he believed it was for the best. Would you please bring Uzumaki Naruto and Sabaku no Gaara down to the arena floor? Would Uzumaki Naruto and Sabaku no Gaara please come down to the arena floor? Naruto jumped over the railing and met Genma in the middle of the ring, taking a deep calming breath. Gaara arrived not long after in Asuna Shunshin, though the boy appeared to be having a more difficult time than usual. Genma nodded to himself as he looked at both fighters. The final match of the semifinals may now begin. He jumped away quickly as Naruto, like the Uzumaki before him, rocketed forward and punched the Suna Genin in the face. Gaara had no time to react, but to everyone's surprise, the sand still came to the boy's defense, barely preventing him from being injured. Well, look at that. I guess it wasn't Shukaku protecting you the whole time, was it? Chirped Naruto. Gaara stared at the sand, perplexed, before a memory of his uncle flashed into his mind. Was that what Yoshimaru meant? Say something? Naruto asked, his face irritated. My uncle once told me that the sand that protected me did so by my mother's will even after she died. Is that what he meant? Gaara inquired quietly. Despite being whispered, the words echoed throughout the stadium, making many Suna shinobi wince. They, like Gaara, thought the defense was Shukaku's, but Shukaku had been cut off from Gaara. So it was clear that it wasn't. They were now questioning everything they knew about him. From what I understand, a parent's job is to protect their child, and a mother tends to do so on a level that many fathers cannot. According to your understanding? I'm an orphan. I never knew my parents, so I wouldn't know from experience, but I've spent a lot of time watching families, imagining my parents and me in their places, imagining what it would have been like if they had survived the Kyuubi attack. Naruto admitted to lying about not knowing his parents. You wouldn't understand what it feels like. What I feel. The stadium fell silent when he said, yes, I do. Gaara looks perplexed. Where do you think the Kyuubi went after it vanished from the battlefield? The Yondaime sealed it inside the only child born that day, me. I know how it feels to be hated and feared for something beyond my control. I live it every day here in the Leaf. It's human nature to fear what we don't understand, and the Biju are the one thing on the planet that shinobi know next to nothing about, so naturally they fear them. However, while it is in our nature to fear what we don't understand, it is also our choice not to. I'm certain that if people had sat down centuries ago and made an effort to try and understand the Biju, we wouldn't be here right now. There wouldn't be any need for Jinchuriki, and the Biju and humans could live side by side in peace, protecting each other. I'm sure you've felt it, Gaara. Shukaku's. After learning about my status 10 months ago, I did a lot of thinking about it, and no matter how hard I try, I can't come to a different conclusion. Biju, like their Jinchuriki, are nothing more than a product of their environment and attitudes toward them. Humans may label us, but the fact is that they are the reason that Jinchuriki exist in the first place. They spent so long hating the Biju and attacking them that. However, we Jinchuriki have a choice. We can choose to give in to the hatred and retaliate, or we can choose to prove them wrong by rising above it. Right now, we are opposites in almost everything. You are 1, I am 9. You don't think anything will change no matter how you act. I know things will. For me, they already have. I have found people I trusted enough to tell my secret to, and they have accepted me, and I propose that we fight for our ideals, not for a promotion, Gaara. We put our beliefs and ways on the line, and the loser must admit that they were too one-dimensional in their thinking and admit that there are other possibilities. What exactly do you mean? I win, you try my way of life. Try persistently to reach out to those around you no matter how many reject you until you find that one person who accepts you. Then the two of you look for a second. Until in no time, you've surrounded yourself in friends. You don't need many friends, just those who accept you no matter what. After all, quality is better than quantity. Gaara grumbled bitterly, you have an advantage. No, I don't. This is between Jinchuriki, not the Biju. I won't use Kyuubi's chakra. With Shukaku sealed away, that means any victory you have is yours and is not tainted by Shukaku's presence. Right now, everything you have done is overshadowed by Shukaku's presence. Do you agree? After a minute, he said. Yes. Naruto smiled as he nodded and returned to his stance. TenTen said you should still be able to control your sand, Gaara, so don't hold back on me. The redhead smirked, and the rings slowly but steadily reappeared around his eyes, covering the now prominent bags. The sand shot forward without a word, attempting to ensnare the blonde genin. Naruto jumped out of the way and nodded to himself. Step 1, finished. Naruto formed a single seal and turned to face the incoming sand, dodging a second wave. Futon. Daitapa, Naruto said as the wind blew forward, already focusing his chakra for a second jutsu. Just as the wind blew the sand apart, Naruto leapt into the air and drew a kunai. Kunai Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The kunai he launched began to multiply rapidly in the air as a metal rain of death descended on the genin, who grimaced and forced more of his chakra into the sand, where he created a shield to block the projectiles with the help of his mother. Gaara twitched in annoyance as the rain stopped and decided to remove his sand armor. He didn't have the chakra or the concentration to keep it up right now. Looking in the direction he had last seen the boy, his eyes widened as he began to scan the arena for the blonde. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to locate him. Where are you, Uzumaki? Naruto asked, his expression schooled. He only had one chance, and if he blew it, hell would break loose and Gaara would perish. Kurama, I know I've been planning this for a while, but can I really do it? Brat, did you or did you not defeat the Jubi, a deity, and fight Madara while being only a tenth of your current strength? That's an excellent point. Thank you for the pep talk, he said, rolling his eyes. Refocusing on the task at hand, he expelled from his mind any thoughts of having to explain what he had done and how he had learned it. Gaara was becoming irritated. In the few seconds that his vision had been impaired, the blonde had slipped into hiding and had yet to emerge. He nodded to himself and moved away from the center of the ring, tired of hiding. When he landed on the top of the wall, he did something no one expected. He began forming hand seals. It wouldn't be as powerful without Shukaku, but it should do the job. What is he up to? How am I to know? I should have had more time for a small area like this. Raisa Bakuri, he said, clapping his hands in front of him, his face soon obscured by a massive wall of sand. What the hell happened? In shock, Naruto yelled, leaping from the cover of the trees. The sand almost appeared to grow tendrils as it attacked the blonde, attempting to trap him beneath the raging sea. As the sand engulfed Naruto, he gritted his teeth and nodded his head, diverting some of his chakra away from the technique he had been practicing. As Naruto displayed his monstrous reserves, a cloud of smoke temporarily obscured everyone's vision. He began to use the clones as trampolines to get above the cloud after replacing with a clone. As the sand collided with them, each clone popped. When he got to the last one, it grabbed him and threw him as high as it could with no time to spare. That was close, Naruto said, twitching in irritation. Looking down at the arena that had recently been transformed into Gaara's personal playground. When he looked over at the redhead, he noticed he was breathing heavily and his reserves were nearly depleted. He launched another clone across the arena, right at his opponent, forcing him to jump back into the arena. Naruto returned to his original plan by nodding to himself. He took another calming breath as he landed on the wall, even as the ground began to shake. Gaara's eyes narrowed as he jumped into the air, just as a sharp golden kunai attached to a chain flew past his face. He was forced to dodge again and again as more bursts from the ground and those that had missed changed direction midair. Naruto jumped on one of the chains and began running along it as if it were the ground itself, with Gaara occupied. It didn't take long for the exhausted boy to make a mistake when his legs gave out from exhaustion, and before he knew it, Gaara was wrapped in chains, all his chakra suppressed. Naruto was behind him, his hand resting on Gaara's back, before he could yell in surprise. Kai! He yelled, forming half seals with his left hand. Sabaku no Hago Sha no Jinja. Fuin. Chakra rushed through Gaara's body, making him feel lighter and less burdened. The chains lowered them both to the ground after a few seconds, and Naruto removed his hand and nodded at Genma, who appeared to have just witnessed the Shodown resurrect himself. Winner Uzumaki Naruto! Naruto exclaimed, extending his hand to help him up. The strategy and jutsu would have worked against almost anyone else. Thanks for the good fight, Gaara. The Sand Nin hesitantly took the offered hand and felt himself lifted off the ground. What did you do? Naruto inquired, raising an amused brow. Something feels different than it did before. Oh, that. Naruto exclaimed nervously. I broke the half-assed seal Suna put on you and Shukaku and replaced it with a much stronger seal that will allow you to sleep and not interfere with your chakra so you can use it freely without Shukaku's overpowering yours. You broke my seal, Gaara said slowly, as if Naruto were a moron. It was fine. Those chains would have prevented Shukaku from escaping anyway, and since you've used so much of his chakra by now, it wouldn't have mattered if your body was flooded with it anyway. Naruto laughed nervously before smiling. By the way, if you want, I'll be your first friend. What? You lost meaning, so you have to try things my way, including making friends, so I'll be your first friend, Naruto explained, causing Gaara to nod numbly. I also recommend that when you get home, you try to mend fences with your siblings. I guarantee they were afraid of Shukaku and the amount of influence he had over you, but now that he doesn't have that control and they have seen the real you, they shouldn't be afraid anymore. Well, they are your siblings, they will always be afraid for your safety. Thank you, Uzumaki Naruto, Naruto said as the Sand Genin exited the arena, grinning and looking at the twitching Proctor. Will it be a three-way tie or two single matches? What about the cages? That Genin of yours is reckless and an absolute genius. It takes a lot of balls to use the Uzumaki clan's unique bloodline in combination with a secondary seal to replace a poorly made Jinchuriki seal in the middle of the village, a declared, staring at the sandbox that used to be an arena. Rasa remained silent as he observed the red-haired Jinchuriki leave the field. He knew he couldn't force him to fight, and with Shukaku sealed, it wouldn't matter if he did. Damn you. I intend to have a long discussion with him about that, Hiruzen gritted, knowing how reckless that had been. Having so much of his focus on restraining the Jinchuriki and performing such a high-level seal could have resulted in the village being destroyed. Even Minato and Kushina would not have attempted it. Don't be so harsh on him, that was a brilliant strategy and one that no one would have expected. Besides, it shows that your village has quite the up-and-coming seal master in their midst, a joked. He had not expected Hiruzen to become so agitated by his own shinobi. Not to mention a slew of genin. There was no way he could have known the genin were so skilled. After all, a month isn't nearly enough time to make that much progress, so it had been going on since they left the academy. I don't like one of your genin tampering with my village's seal and then calling it half-assed. How do we know the one he used is up to par? Rasa gritted angrily. If it will alleviate your concerns, we can ask Jiraiya to look into it after the finals, Hiruzen reassured. That's excellent. With the help of Jonin. What? Why? How? When? I have so many questions. Spluttered Asuma, turning to face Jiraiya, who was unusually serious. I told him not to do that, he said, frustrated. Do what? Zabuza asked, trying to get the shock out of his system. Use his chains in conjunction with any seal over intermediate. He still needs far more focus to use them than he can afford to divert from Fuinjutsu. What level was that seal then? Guy inquired. In Konoha's standards, it would be ranked as a level 15 seal, mastery level. In Uzu's standards, it would still be a level 15, but only advanced level, Karen explained to the Jonin and Genin who were nearby. How good is he with Fuinjutsu? Asuma asked quietly. Over the month break, I finished his training and smoothed out the roughness. He is a level 30 seal master in Uzu's standards, and that seal is one of his own design, Jiraiya admitted. Damn. Yeah, he got pretty far on his own, and to be honest, Sasuke isn't far behind, sitting at level 10 in Konoha's standards. Damn it, we're all getting shown up by Genin. Asuma exclaimed, making everyone's face flush. Did he forget they were both time travelers? Was the collective thought of those who were listening. Return to the ring. There's no way we're cleaning this, Genma sighed exasperatedly. I could seal all of the sand and give it to Gaara as a gift, Naruto advised. Genma raised an eyebrow in thought as he considered the offer, then shook his head. He should have accepted, but he couldn't let the Genin do the cleaning. Nah. Look alive, kid, Genma said quietly, looking around the room. The final Chunin exam match will be a three-way fight between Uzumaki Naruto, Uchiha Sasuke, and Hyuga Hinata. Will the remaining two contestants report to the battlefield? Sasuke appeared instantly in a quick shunshin, followed by Hinata in a fire shunshin. After a brief moment of thought, Genma groaned. Let the final Chunin exams match between Genin Team 7 begin, he declared, and everyone in the stadium, including the aforementioned Genin, began to sweat. Genma was correct, as the final three contestants were all members of the same team. In the stands, Kakashi smiled triumphantly at the announcement. So, Just like team practice, or shall we do this as a progression match? Naruto asked, slipping into his dragon form. Hinata did the same with her Yuho, and Sasuke relaxed into the interceptor fist's opening stance. We haven't had a progress match in a while, and we've all made progress, so. Hinata trailed off, her chakra flaring and the Tensigan reactivating. In response, Sasuke smirked and activated the Mangekyo Sharingan. Naruto smirked and turned to face them. No holding back. He yelled, flying towards Hinata, who quickly backpedaled to maintain distance. Whatever style you used, the dragon style was too adaptable to fight openly. Naruto's charge was cut short when Sasuke caught him with a right hook. Naruto lashed out with his foot, hoping to catch Sasuke off guard, twisting his body to the side to avoid the hit. He was unsuccessful as Sasuke caught it and quickly released it to avoid being struck by Hinata's strike. In the end, Hinata and Sasuke collaborated to keep Naruto from gaining traction in the fight and setting the pace. Something they knew they couldn't let happen. The three genin, on the other hand, were merely a blur of movement that few could follow. The civilians only caught glimpses of them as they came to a halt or reached a standstill. The veteran shinobi were convinced they were witnessing a Jonin-level spar between friends. The Kage, on the other hand, were taken aback. Watched in awe as what was clearly the strongest team to emerge from the village since the Sannin focused solely on the match. Each strike is executed precisely, and each attack is launched with no wasted energy or exaggerated movements. It was almost as if they were watching war veterans engage in combat. Progress match? Inquired, drawing Hiruzen's attention to the lightning shadow. Apparently, every now and then, Kakashi will spar with his team at full strength with the stipulation that they act as if their opponents are enemies that need to be taken alive with minimal injuries as the team doesn't have a medic with chakra to spare, thus forcing them to show him everything that they have improved on with and without him, and their teammates get a better idea of what they are capable of. A's eyebrows rose dramatically at the description. Doesn't he exhaust the team? They run him ragged, mastering everything he gives them quickly and without complaint, then turning around and asking for more, he says. I really wish they were Kumo genin right now. I'm a little jealous. I'm forced to agree with on this. I wish they were my genin instead. Such dedication to training is very rare in children nowadays and should be nurtured when found, Rasa said, clearly impressed by the intricate dance being performed. I suppose Konoha is fortunate to have those three. Their advancements have inspired the rest of their classmates and the genin from the previous year to try and keep up, Hiruzen said lightly. He was sweating on the inside, though. There was no way that was their full strength, and his anxiety increased. With the level of cooperation they possessed, they could easily cause massive damage to the village using only the skills they were demonstrating. If they did turn traitor, he wasn't sure Jiraiya could handle them on her own. How had things become so complicated so quickly? You've definitely improved, Naruto-kun, Hinata said quietly as the three stood apart, catching their breaths. You, too, Hinata-chan. Naruto exclaimed to his future wife. A gagging noise drew their attention, and they laughed at Sasuke's irritated expression. You've improved, Sasuke-san, they exclaimed, making him twitch in irritation. Instead of responding verbally, he inhaled. Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu. Both genin parted ways and raised a single hand to form a half-seal. Gokakyu no Jutsu, Kaden. Futon. Daitapa. All three jutsu clashed and violently exploded as Sasuke and Naruto clashed above it with swords, Hinata nowhere to be seen. That is, until they were forced to dodge her arrow cage Bunshin no Jutsu's hail of arrows. Once again on the defensive from the long-distance fighter, the two men concentrated on dodging and blocking projectiles, never noticing the glass under their feet from the earlier explosion. Bunshin no Jutsu, arrow cage. Bunshin no Jutsu, kunai cage. Chidori Nagashi. Sasuke took advantage of the hail of metal weapons and directed the lightning through each weapon in a move reminiscent of TenTen's death. Doden. Doryuden no Jutsu, Naruto called out, launching the dragon at Sasuke, who quickly countered with a hail of Chidori Senbon. Unfortunately, the Senbon only triggered the explosive seals hidden on the dragon, forcing him to dodge in order to avoid the explosion. Bansho Tenin. Naruto cursed as he felt himself being drawn towards his girlfriend and began a replacement jutsu, only to be cut off when the first of Hinata's Hake Rokuhuion Sho made contact, disrupting his chakra. It feels like old times, eh Kurama? How did you get hit again with that technique? The Biju grumbled as Naruto crashed to the ground and jumped to his feet to avoid another fireball from Sasuke. Finding no room to counterattack, Naruto summoned his chains once more, this time enclosing himself in a dome to give himself some breathing room. When he saw the barrier Naruto had erected, Sasuke cursed and was forced to divert his attention as Hinata turned her attack towards him, barely managing to get Susanoo up in time to avoid being hit in the same way Naruto had. He lashed out his sword, coating it with lightning chakra, hoping to break Hinata's concentration, only to be repelled and sent sprawling to the ground by a Shinra Tensei. I despise that jutsu, he exclaimed angrily as Naruto's barrier collapsed and a surge of chakra erupted. As he reopened his chakra points, he grimaced and bit his finger, causing both of his opponents to curse, and Sasuke quickly mimicked his actions. Kachiyose no Jutsu. They both exclaimed, obscuring their forms with smoke. Within seconds, both erupted from the top of the cloud, one on top of the other. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about us, Sasuke-sama. Not a chance, Takamaru. Right now, we have an aerial battle to worry about. Hinata has the Tensigan, so be careful, Sasuke said to the medium-sized hawk on which he was standing. Hi. Naruto-sama. Hibana, I hope you don't mind. I know we still have a long way to go in terms of bonding, but Hinata decided to take this battle to the skies. Of course I don't mind Naruto-sama, said the Crimson Dragon. Hinata smirked as they began what resembled a game of chase in midair. When they got close enough, they would start a brief taijutsu fight in midair before being caught by their summons to chase Hinata, who would flee laughing. With the help of Jonin. Dragons? Naruto can summon dragons? Asuma exclaimed, his cigarette falling from his mouth. Yup. Kakashi exclaimed, laughing at their expressions. Since when has he been able to do that? Well, when he defeated Ryusuke Inami, he discovered a sealed scroll on his person. It took him a while to break into it, which he finally did about 4 months ago, but he didn't have the time to sort through the contents, which he finally did in Uzu over the last month, and the summoning contract was among the items stored inside. Apparently it was a clan contract that Ryusuke stole when he deserted Uzu. Is that Sasuke's hawk? Again, I told him what had happened when he mentioned not being able to use his, Jiraiya whispered, when I did it without a contract, and since theirs were locked until they re-signed them, we gave him permission to go ahead and see where it took him. It was hilarious when, instead of the snakes, as we thought, he ended up with the hawks. Jiraiya laughed at the other Jonin's surprised expressions. I know, right? Small world, laughed Kakashi. What about the cages? Dragons. That is a dragon. At the sight of the mythical creature, A appeared to have lost his ability to form a coherent sentence. Yes. That is a dragon, Rasa said, as surprised as his fellow Kage. Oh, please. Now they have summonings that I am unaware of? Hiruzen yelled mentally as tears streamed down a chibi Hiruzen's cheeks. On the field. Realizing that nothing was happening, the three of them landed back on the ground, and Sasuke and Naruto cancelled their summonings. Hinata contemplatively looked at her teammates. She had anticipated a tough fight, but this was ridiculous. She mentally laughed after a second. They had served in the military. she still needed 19 years and 3 wars to catch up to their battle instincts. Regardless, she had no intention of backing down. Suidan. Suiryudan no Jutsu, Naruto yelled as he raced toward Sasuke, quickly forming his signature technique, the Rasengan. As a chirping sound filled the air, Hinata cursed and raised her hands to prepare her defense. Shugohaki Rokujian Shish. Chidori. Yelled everyone as Hinata's defensive jutsu ripped right through the water dragon and Sasuke's collided with Naruto's, causing a massive explosion and propelling both boys backwards. A second explosion rang out almost immediately, as the arena was blanketed in thick smoke. For a few seconds, the sound of clanging metal could be heard before everything fell silent. As the smoke cleared, the audience leaned forward, their anticipation growing. When he heard the clanging, Kakashi sighed. "So that's it, isn't it?" "What do you mean, Kakashi? We still don't know what happened," Ino exclaimed, pouting. "I recognize this tactic. They've used it before, and the lack of movement indicates that it ended the same way as before." Just as Ino was about to ask what the outcome was, the smoke began to thin and the combatants became visible. Sasuke's sword was frozen in place at Naruto's throat by the chains that were connected to the boy's arm. Hinata was pointing a drawn arrow at Sasuke's head, which was also bound by chains. Naruto was on one knee, clutching Sasuke's wrist to stop the sword's path, while his other hand was stuck in a half-seal with a single senbon piercing his neck. Genma blinked in confusion, unsure how to call the game. "It's a draw," Kakashi said as he approached the barrier separating the spectators in the arena, drawing everyone's attention. "Eh?" Neither Sasuke nor Hinata can move away from the explosive seals on the ends of those chains, and while it would only take a single pulse of chakra to detonate them, the explosion would cause Hinata to release the arrow and Sasuke to fall forward because the seal is on his back, meaning Sasuke and Naruto would be fatally wounded while Hinata may very well be blown in half. Naruto would move, but as long as that senbon Genma turned to face Sasuke, who nodded slowly, confirming their positions. None of the competitors can continue, so this match is a draw, and the Chunin exam finals are over. Kakashi laughed and jumped down, slowly untangling the genin from their awkward positions, and sighed at the three of them. "This happens every time you use this attack plan, so why do you keep using it?" Smirked all three genin. To prevent them from winning, they agreed. Kakashi's sweat dropped and his eyes narrowed at a minor movement that most people would have missed. "Showtime," he said quietly as feathers began to rain down on the audience and an explosion rang out outside the village. "Did you do it?" "Yes," Naruto replied, his playful tone gone. "While we were in the smoke, we spread the shadow clones throughout the village." "Good. Hinata, go to the hospital, they'll need your help, clones or not." Sasuke, accompany her there. Naruto, go to the academy. They saluted the Jonin and parted ways. Kakashi turned and looked at the barrier that had been erected on top of the cage box, nodding that everything was going according to plan. He nodded to Guy before proceeding to the barrier. "There is no way in, Hitaki-san," gritted one of the Anbu. Kakashi shook his head and looked around at the gathered Anbu. "Only 3 of you need to be here. Spread out and make sure the civilians and genin escorting them are safe," he yelled. The Anbu jerked, then looked to their captains, who nodded. Returning his focus to the battle within, Kakashi revealed his Sharingan and activated the seal over his right eye. Naruto had made a seal specifically for this purpose. When the barrier falls, the red head on the corner over there is to be captured, preferably without injury, and held pending release into the custody of the Uzumaki clan. The ANBU's eyes widened, but they nodded anyway. He felt the familiar pulling sensation he had grown accustomed to after focusing and activating his Mangekyo Sharingan. To the elder's surprise, he was standing by Sandame's side in seconds. "How did you do that?" Orochimaru demanded angrily. As you may have guessed, my Sharingan is evolved on the same level as Itachi's. The seal on my right eye tricks both my body and Sharingan into thinking I have the complete set when I don't, allowing me to access all of the abilities the original wielder would have been able to, one of which allows me to slip in and out of this dimension and reappear wherever I want. Kakashi shrugged. Can you guess, Naruto? Hiruzen sighed. Hi, Sandaime said, shaking his head and returning his gaze to the snake Sannin, his eyes narrowed. He had no time for this. I really want to take all of your students, Kakashi. They are simply wonderful. To think that the Byakugan evolved similarly to the Sharingan and that the Uzumaki Kekkai Genkai still exists. Simply marvelous. Now I can't decide whether to take Sasuke or Kun's Hinata body. Chans. You know Naruto would hunt you down to the lowest levels of hell itself just to kill you if you touched Hinata, right? Hiruzen's eyes widened. Is the Kyuubi brat madly in love with the Hyuga princess? I'm sorry you got caught up in this Raikage-sama, but there was simply no way to alert you without tipping off Orochimaru. Kakashi apologized to the lightening shadow on the side. No problem. This could be interesting. I turned and looked at the Kumo Nin standing outside the barrier after a second. He nodded to himself after making a decision. All Kumo Nin must assist Konoha in this invasion, he yelled, grabbing everyone's attention before they bowed and sped away. Thank you. Kakashi replied with an eye smile before returning his gaze to the snake. It's time to skin a snake now.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.